We're constantly looking for those signals, aren't we?
Mm,
The indicators of where opportunity lies, especially when the economic landscape feels, well, a bit uncertain.
definitely.
And since you're tuning in, you're likely someone who values getting smart on these trends quickly and thoroughly.
Precisely. And for someone like you keen on understanding the deeper currents of business and investment, today's topic should be, well, particularly interesting.
Yeah.
We're going to explore a potentially surprising dynamic, something happening in the franchise world during economic downturns.
That's right. We're diving into why franchise systems often seem to expand their numbers, add units when the economy softens, and maybe job losses pick up.
Yeah, it sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It really does. We've got some compelling material to unpack this. There's an article that highlights this exact phenomenon, and also a detailed piece by George Nauf on something called the Fractional Franchisor Model.
Okay, so our goal for you today is pretty clear. First, let's try to understand the reasons behind this, counter-cyclical growth in franchising.
Right.
And second, explore this fractional franchisor concept. See if it's a potentially savvy, maybe unique investment path within that whole franchising world.
Okay, let's get into it. Let's tackle that initial surprise head on. It really jumped out, this idea that when the economy takes a hit, people lose jobs.
Yeah.
The number of franchise locations actually tends to increase. What's driving that?
What's fascinating here is the underlying human response. When individuals face job displacement or just increased economic anxiety,
Sure.
they naturally start looking, seeking alternative ways to secure their financial future. And franchising often pops up as a compelling option.
How so?
Well, it offers a chance to take ownership, right? To invest in a business model that already has, hopefully, an established track record,
Yeah.
especially when other investments might seem, well, riskier in a volatile market. People are essentially looking for a pathway, some stability maybe, and a chance to capitalize on a future economic recovery.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. It's almost like a flight to a perceived safer harbor, business-wise, when traditional jobs feel less secure.
Exactly.
Now, when someone thinks about getting into franchising, maybe the first thoughts are, okay, I'll launch my own franchise brand, or I'll buy an existing one outright.
Right, the obvious paths.
But our sources kind of hint that those aren't necessarily the most efficient routes, especially for investors looking for maybe a quicker entry point.
Yeah, that's a key distinction the sources make. Building a franchise brand from scratch, that's a huge undertaking.
Huge help.
We're talking a multi-year effort. It requires substantial capital, building infrastructure. It's a really considerable barrier to entry for many people.
Okay, so years of development, big upfront investment, not exactly a quick move if you're trying to adapt to a changing economy.
Not at all.
And what about acquiring an existing franchise brand? That might seem faster, but the sources suggest that has its own challenges too.
Absolutely. The market for buying a good, well-performing franchise brand is highly competitive. You'll likely face numerous interested buyers, and the whole due diligence, the acquisition process itself, it can be quite lengthy. Complex, too.
Right. So neither of those traditional routes necessarily offers the agility or maybe the unique angle we're discussing today.
Pretty much.
Okay, so those direct paths might not be the most streamlined. And this leads us to this really intriguing concept, the fractional franchisor. It's presented as a potential answer, maybe a different way for strategic investors to get involved with franchising. Now, when I first heard fractional franchisor, I immediately thought, okay, master franchising.
A natural comparison.
Are they basically the same thing?
Well, that's where it gets interesting. While the fractional model did sort of evolve from master franchising, it really represents a more sophisticated, financially focused strategy. Think of it as like next-gen master franchising.
Cool.
George Nauf's insights, the ones in his article, really help spell out these differences.
So let's unpack that evolution then. Can you give us a quick rundown? What did the traditional master franchise model typically involve?
Okay, so traditionally, a master franchisee, they'd acquire the rights to develop and operate within a specific territory.
Like a state or a region,
Exactly, maybe a state, maybe even a larger region. Their main focus was operational, meaning recruiting new franchisees within that territory, providing the initial training, ongoing support, basically managing the brand's presence at the local level. They were, regional developers and operators.
Okay, so pretty hands-on. Involved in the day-to-day management, expansion within a specific area.
Very much so.
Now, how does the fractional franchisor model pivot away from that?
Yeah.
What are the core differences in, like, focus and responsibility.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. The fractional franchisor model. It shifts away from that intense operational focus.
Okay.
Instead of being primarily concerned with the daily grind of managing a territory, the emphasis shifts. It moves towards owning a portion of the overall franchise system's financial returns and strategically guiding the growth of existing franchisees. It's a move towards, let's say, a financial stake and more of a mentorship role.
So less focus on local ops, more on the bigger picture, the financial health, the strategic expansion of the whole network.
You got it.
What are some of the key characteristics, then, that define this fractional franchisor role?
Well, there are several key aspects. First, and maybe most importantly, is the ownership of cash flow.
Ownership of cash flow, how does that work?
Typically, it involves agreements that grant them a percentage, a slice of the initial franchise fees, and the ongoing royalties generated by the franchisees they mentor or coach.
Right.
This can create a pretty significant passive income stream, potentially, without the demands of daily operations.
Passive income tied to the success of the overall franchise system. That sounds pretty compelling for a lot of investors, I'd imagine.
It can be, yes.
What else characterizes this role?
Secondly, coaching and mentorship become really central.
Okay.
So instead of focusing on recruiting newbies or basic operational training, the fractional franchisor acts more like a high-level strategic advisor to existing franchisees.
Guiding them.
Yeah, helping them refine their business models, navigate growth challenges, position themselves for, sustained success. It's about lifting the performance across the network.
So they're working with franchisees who are already up and running, already established, and maybe looking to scale up.
That's often the case.
Which connects to another characteristic, mentioned this focus on empire building.
Exactly. Fractional franchisors often work specifically with those franchisees who have the ambition, the drive to own multiple locations.
The multi-unit owners.
Right. People building substantial wealth through multi-unit ownership. These are often experienced operators, but they're looking for that strategic guidance to achieve really significant expansion. The fractional franchisor provides that high-level perspective.
It sounds very strategic, very advisory, almost like being a private equity partner, but at the franchise level.
That's a good way to think about it.
And the source material also mentions leverage in mergers and acquisitions. How does that come into play?
Well, because fractional franchisors are so deeply involved in the growth strategies,
right,
and they have this broad view of the system's overall health, they're often really well positioned to spot and facilitate strategic M&A activity. For example, they might help a successful multi-unit operator acquire a smaller, maybe complementary business within the same franchise system.
Oh, interesting.
Which could lead to greater market share, operational efficiencies, that kind of thing.
So they're not just guiding individual growth, but also playing a role in the strategic consolidation, maybe restructuring of the franchise landscape itself.
Potentially, yes. That's a significant level of influence and value creation.
Yeah, no kidding. And the article also draws a connection to private equity interest in franchising. You mentioned PE earlier.
Yes, and that's really relevant now. When we consider the increasing interest of private equity firms in the franchise sector,
which is definitely a trend,
the role of the fractional franchisor becomes even more strategic. By helping franchisees build bigger, more profitable operations, these fractional franchisors are essentially creating more attractive targets for private equity investment.
Making them ripe for acquisition or investment.
Exactly. They can even act as a bridge sometimes, connecting high-performing franchisees with potential PE partners to fuel even more expansion.
Wow. Okay. It really sounds like the fractional franchisor operates at a very sophisticated financial and strategic level within this whole ecosystem.
It's definitely evolved.
Now, the article also highlights the timely nature of this model, linking it to the growing corporate exodus. Tell me about that.
All right. What's particularly relevant there is the increasing number of experienced professionals leaving corporate jobs.
We hear a lot about that.
Yes, seeking more autonomy, entrepreneurial paths. Many of these folks have significant financial know-how, strategic thinking skills from their corporate careers.
Sure, strong backgrounds.
But they may not want the day-to-day operational complexity, the grind of running a small business themselves.
And that's where the fractional franchisor model becomes particularly appealing, right, for that type of person.
Precisely. They can leverage their strategic skills, their financial expertise, without getting bogged down in the daily management stuff.
Makes sense.
These individuals often have exactly the skills needed to mentor and guide franchisees, especially those looking to develop and scale larger, more sophisticated franchise operations.
So they can provide the strategic insights that maybe franchisees, particularly those also coming from the corporate world, really need to achieve that big growth.
Exactly right.
So it's a really interesting convergence of trends, isn't it? You've got experienced professionals looking for entrepreneurial outlets that use their expertise.
Yeah.
And the fractional franchisor model offering exactly that within this expanding franchise sector.
It lines up quite well.
Okay, let's quickly summarize then some of the key advantages of this model, not just for the investor, the fractional franchisor themselves, but also maybe for the franchisees and the wider franchise system.
Sure. So for the investor, the fractional franchisor, the benefits include, reduced operational burden.
Less day-to-day hassle.
Right. The potential for consistent, scalable cash flow tied directly to how well the franchisees are doing.
Performance-based.
And the opportunity to get involved in strategic M&A, leverage those private equity trends we talked about.
Okay, that's the investor side. What about the franchisees?
For franchisees, they gain access to high-level mentorship, strategic guidance from experienced people, which can really help them accelerate their growth and profitability.
So better support, potentially faster growth.
Could be. And for the main franchisor, the brand itself, it fosters a network of more successful, more financially stable, and strategically smarter franchisees. That strengthens the entire brand in the long run.
Yeah, it really does sound like a potentially win-win-win model for everyone involved.
When structured correctly, yes.
The fractional franchisor concept seems like a very strategic, very evolved way to participate in the growth of franchising, especially maybe in the current economic climate where more people are drawn to its potential.
It definitely represents a significant evolution in franchise investment. It moves beyond those traditional operational roles to really emphasize financial strategy, mentorship, and alignment with these broader economic and investment trends.
This deep dive into the fractional franchisor model has been, well, incredibly insightful. It's fascinating to see how the franchise world keeps adapting, generating new opportunities, especially during these economic shifts.
It really is dynamic.
And the core idea that franchise brands often see unit growth during downturns driven by individuals looking for new paths.
Yeah.
And that this fractional franchisor role offers a unique, strategic way to capitalize on that growth.
That's a powerful takeaway for our listeners, I think.
Indeed. And it prompts you, the listener, to maybe consider how might your own background, your expertise, align with this kind of role.
Interesting thought.
Could you see yourself guiding the expansion of franchise empires, leveraging these strategic financial opportunities? It's definitely a compelling path to at least explore.
Absolutely. And look, if this deep dive into the fractional franchisor model has sparked your interest and you're maybe considering exploring opportunities in the franchise world,
we highly recommend connecting with George Nauf. That's George Nauf at myperfectfranchise.com. He offers a free strategy session.
He's really a leading expert in this specific field and obviously the source for a lot of what we discussed today.
Definitely worth checking out if this resonates. myperfectfranchise.com.
The landscape of franchising is just constantly evolving, isn't it? And the fractional franchisor model is a prime example of that innovation.
For sure.
It presents a unique and potentially really rewarding pathway for those looking to be part of this next phase of growth and investment in the sector.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring the opportunities around you.